When discussing games and their quality, there's usually a reasonably reliable correlation between how good a game is and how well it sells, although occasionally there's games that sell really well even though they're terrible, and sometimes there's games that just do whatever the fuck they want. Fuck mobile games, am I right? I mean, yeah, kinda. Everyone talks about how microtransactions hurt modern games, and mobile games act as ground zero in that regard. And once someone stumbles across an idea that makes money, copycat games spring up left, right and centre, giving a sense that best-selling apps are all just trying to copy each other. But as soon as one app with a bit of wider appeal took it seriously, no one could keep up. And yet I feel that it's indicative of the power of hype culture and social media that a game like Pokemon Go can explode in popularity like this. There's a lot of positives, there should be a video by me on that topic somewhere on YouTube. But these positives come at some cost. Not quite searching for a diamond in a pile of shit, just it could be a lot better. These last few weeks of playing Pokemon Go has been equal parts fun and mind-numbingly frustrating. Why is everyone talking about Pokemon Go? Because there's so much to talk about. Pokemon Go, the dynamic augmented reality mobile video game that blurs the line between the real world and the virtual world, fabricated in order to give you the perfect platform to catch Pokemon. Which is all lovely, since distorting the line through augmenting reality brings video games into the real world, but it also goes the other way. You can think about how gaming can be implemented into the world around us, but there's a more restricted way of looking at it. Put it this way, going somewhere just for Pokemon is kinda really stupid. So yeah, Pokemon Go is getting people off their butts and outside, but when they get there, the focus is almost universally on Pokemon. Which is fine when you're strolling around your hometown, but not as good if, say, you're on a family outing. Indirectly, the game lets you ignore the world around you and focus on what it means for catching Pokemon. I don't know about you, but I'd prefer it if my memories of a place aren't dictated by what Pokemon I caught there. Hey, how was your trip to the Louvre in Paris? Ah, really good actually. I hatched a bunch of eggs, found a Parasect, and finally evolved my Magikarp. I don't want to tell anyone how they should play a game, but if you're visiting Auschwitz and the only thoughts in your head are about where the nearest Pokestop is, I recommend you rethink a lot of things. Living in the countryside has its ups and downs. You can keep sheep, but are more likely to find mice in the house. Air is clear, but only until they start harvesting. You can still play video games out here, but not really online. But hey, even though Pokemon Go takes a lot of info from servers, it runs off mobile data, so it's all good. And yet, thanks to my geographical location, making progress in this game has been slow going for me. Gonna be honest, never saw this problem coming. Hey, you remember all those torrents of Pokemon that would overwhelm you anytime you entered any city in any game in the series? You remember all those Zubats you found just screwing around on the streets? I understand that you've got to alter a few things when bringing Pokemon into the real world, and since the game has quite a potent social aspect to it, you need to put the important shit in places where there's lots of people, but playing Pokemon Go in a city is such a huge advantage. I also understand that Pokemon are found on routes to discourage people from going to stupid places to find Pokemon, but the fact that the encounter rate doesn't skyrocket when you wander into tall grass upsets that small part of my brain that paid attention when NPCs gave you that advice. My nearest Pokestop is a good 5 miles towards civilization, which is good for keeping fit, but not so good for any kind of sustainability. It does mean that I occasionally have to get onto a train to the nearest built-up area, which feels at least a little bit like an adventure. But hey, slow progress with a game just means you spend longer playing it. And that's fine by me. So you can say that wandering around somewhere kinda fascinating and only being interested in what Pokemon are nearby is a bit shaky and borderline disrespectful, but there's some slightly more severe issues associated with that depending on where you're playing the game. Playing video games outside comes with a whole host of problems ranging from screen glare to battery life, but the clearest issue, especially with a game that requires your attention like Pokemon Go, is becoming too engrossed in the game and not keeping an eye on what you're doing. Kind of awkward when you walk into people, kinda stupid when you walk in front of a train. It clearly isn't Pokemon Go's fault, especially since every time you boot up the game there's a message telling you to not be an idiot, but the safety issues were always going to be an occupational hazard. There's a lot of responsibility on the part of the player to understand the line between game and real world, and that you don't get a free pass from trespassing, from potentially suspicious activity, from walking off a cliff. And even though that I can mount my high horse and say that anyone stupid enough to fall off a cliff in pursuit of some virtual monster deserves their injuries, I found myself outside at 3 AM a couple of days ago looking for a fucking Ghastly. There's little more that Pokemon Go can do about this beyond warning people to be more wary of their surroundings, but idiots will be idiots regardless of the circumstances. Guess it helped find a few dead bodies too, so maybe not all that bad. That's not in the Pokédex. No one saw the impact of Pokemon Go coming. Sure, it's the type of game that had everything in place to succeed, and for what it has done for a lot of people it deserves the coverage it's getting, but there's an inherent problem with any kind of mass popularity like this. Huge trends like these leads to it being the topic of discussion by everyone virtually everywhere, and of course, you can have too much of a good thing. Unlike a lot of the big viral content out there that transcends its initial audience and becomes something that people with no interest have heard of, whether they like it or not, Pokemon is going around for a second lap. While there is something beautifully cyclical about Pokemon reaching maybe more fame on its 20th anniversary, people who didn't like it then aren't likely to get something out of it now. Plus, seeing it everywhere, even coming out of the mouths of politicians, the novelty starts to wear off. And I feel like that's another issue. There's clearly a lot of potential there for Pokemon Go to stick around for a while, but will the fan base? Or will we get to the stage where you can get the same experience from any number of the inevitable imitations that will flood the stores? Pokemon Go could well be the fad of the moment that fizzles out before it really gets going, but if that's the case, we better make the most of it. Still want to know what the hell these teams are supposed to do. You may have noticed that every issue I've mentioned can be found outside the game. Except maybe nothing being in the countryside. Seriously, Niantic, one Pokestop outside my house and we're golden. You've got to remember, as the media talks at length about the dangers of playing Pokemon Go, that there isn't a damn thing the game can do about that. What it can do is work a bit more often. Pokemon Go's gradual rollout across the world meant that I grew impatient and downloaded the app under an account with an American address. My experience beyond that until the game came out proper was one riddled with all sorts of technical issues. Even when Pokemon Go was released in the UK, servers were consistently unavailable and numerous glitches made catching Pokemon more of a crapshoot. They've since settled down a bit, but there's still features that aren't necessarily working as intended. Even when everything is working well, Pokemon Go drains your phone's battery like nothing else. I get that there's a lot going on in the game, but the speed at which battery life decreases makes lengthy play sessions very tricky. These are problems that either have been fixed or should be ironed out in the weeks to come, but the state that the game was released in, when players are at their most impressionable, wasn't really good enough. This goes to show how good a game Pokemon Go really is. The game that everyone's talking about right now. This week, RabbidLuigi, and Nintendo put virtually all the work at the feet of Niantic, which despite Pokemon Go's ridiculous success, is still a small company. So while I can sit here and complain about all the technical problems and the servers being shit, the overriding feeling is, wow, a company that small are able to make and maintain this. You know, the game's got problems, but I don't really mind. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to hear what good things I've got to say about Pokemon Go, I've made that video as well in the same week. It was a busy week. Just take a trip down to this video's description and it'll be in there somewhere. If you did enjoy what you watched, consider donating to my Patreon, where I'm posting video tutorials about how to make YouTube videos. Although I didn't post one this week because I was making 2 videos in a week. Who the fuck makes 2 videos in a week? You know, find something to entertain yourselves with. I'm gonna go back to playing Pokemon Go, actually. It's really late. Probably shouldn't do that. Probably should go to bed. Might do that instead. Good night.